Hey guys, so today I'm going to talk to you about the Obelisk Gate, second book in N.K. Jemisin's Broken Earth trilogy. The first in this trilogy was the fifth season, which recently won a Hugo Award. I just posted a review of that one last week and read this one directly after finishing that one. This review is for those that have already read the fifth season. If you haven't, I highly suggest watching this only after you have, as I'll be spoiling much of that first book here. There are no spoilers for this one though, so this is for those curious on whether or not they should continue the series. So we begin in this one at Essen's answer to Alabaster's question from the very last line of the first book. No, she's got no idea what he's talking about. Well, what is a moon? Well, in this world, people are encouraged throughout their lifetimes and throughout their history to look to the earth, to the ground, to what's beneath, and not to what's above. Those that do make an attempt to study the sky and what's out there are seen as a joke and are mocked. So the idea of a moon, a satellite, as Alabaster also puts it, just baffles her. Essen must decipher the cryptic things that Alabaster, in his extreme exhaustion and general alabasterness, attempts to teach her before he dies and finishes turning to stone. He set off some sort of imaginable apocalyptic geological event, one that's caused a fifth season, and seems to want Essen to continue on with his handiwork. Whether that'll lead to something much, much worse or put a stopper on this fifth season is unclear to her. Whatever the case, it's become obvious to Essen that she's able to connect to the mysterious floating skybound obelisk, like the one she raised at Aelia in the first book, and that they hold some sort of key to solving the issues at hand. All this while living in a newly formed underground com, which is in and of itself mysterious in its origins and workings. She must work with the people of this com, become part of it herself, as threats and danger come to the com at a deadly pace. Then there's the Stone Eaters, making their presence more and more known to those of Castrima Under, specifically, for their own mysterious and possibly sinister purposes. Hua, the Stone Eater that's been traveling with Essen and that's been narrating her story, certainly knows more than he says, does more than Essen's aware of, and doesn't seem to agree or like the other Stone Eaters, not one bit. And interwoven with Essen's story at Castrima, her struggle with Alabaster, the Stone Eaters, the people of the Com, and the Obelisk, is the story of Jemisin, her lost daughter, and now only child, who has been on the road with her father, Jija, since he murdered Yuk, his and Essen's son. Jija's on the lookout for a place where Jemisin can be cured of her orogeny, all while borderline murderous towards her and protective of her. We also get a glimpse into the past and current present of the guardian Shefa, who now, like he did with her mother, takes Jemisin under his wing. Jemisin must develop a disconnect from her confused, hateful, and violent father, while also learning how to manipulate him and survive as an orogene in this completely new fifth season world that's just begun. So this is an absolutely worthy and excellent continuation of the first book. Not only is Essen even more fully developed in this one, but we discover so many new things about this world that the first one withheld from us. There's such a blurred line there. There's never a clear place where the fantasy ends and the secondary world physics begins, which is just how I like it. Orogeny, Stone Eaters, the Guardians, the Obelisk, the Moon, the Earth, and the many things built up and into this world are just the science of how the world works. N.K. Jemisin's giving us, little by little, book by book, a full scope on how she's envisioned this world to work from beneath the ground up. And that's its strongest point. The world building remains fantastic and yet still keeps us at arm's length. There's still so much more to know, and it'll be exciting to see what she shows us and where she brings it all to in the final book. Easily my favorite and most focused on aspects of this book are its world building, history, and mythos, and how its characters fit into that. But there's some other things that I both liked and didn't like, especially in comparison to the first book. I did enjoy following the story of Jemisin and Jija, though I felt many of the people they come into contact with, except maybe Shefa, are mostly one-dimensional, same as those in Castrima with Essen. The people closest to Essen, Ika, Lerna, Hua, Alabaster, etc., are individual personalities that feel like people. Most of the rest of the people there are just indistinguishable and often clumped together. I mean, there's a lot of people there, but it can be difficult to get a sense of some of the more minor characters, which is typical of a story told in first person or second person, I guess, which was probably my biggest issue with this. I could sense no real reasoning for Essen's story to be continually written in second person, other than just because. Like, in the first book, it makes sense. It's a twist in the form, bringing together all the different plot lines in an unexpected way that really works and feels fulfilling. It may irk you for whatever reason in the first book, and if it does, it'll likely irk you even more in this one. But at least it served a purpose. Now we know that Hua is the one narrating it, that Ethan is both Demaya and Cyanite. Her memory has been caught up. She knows these things now, these things that have been told to her for her benefit in the first book. Why does she still need the story narrated to her? I feel like this may have a resolution in the third book, but it also may not. It may end up just being a just cuz kind of thing in the end, which really doesn't work for this. You can still give me Hua's perspective without making the whole thing in second person, because in this one it really doesn't add anything. Overall, I did enjoy this, possibly more than the first book, though that's difficult to say because I think it may just be that the first book felt like a setup for this one, and now this one is fulfilling that setup. Mostly it's still got that this is a setup feel to it, this time for the third and final book, but now having 2/3 of the story instead of 1/3, it makes me feel like I enjoyed it more. This one, like the first one, had a bit of a jumpy and stagnated plot that really doesn't work much on its own without the first book, and without the anticipation of a third and final book to bring a satisfying conclusion, but it did have a more steady arc and an actual climax. Though it's not totally satisfactory as a book on its own still, it does bring a lot of excitement for the finale. Orbit sent me an art copy of this book to review, and I really appreciate that, and I can't wait for the third one to see how this concludes and to review it when it does. Definitely think that if you like the first book, you should continue on for sure, and I'm sure the third one will be a nice ending to the whole thing. But if you didn't like the first one, then I'm not totally sure whether or not you would like this one. So that's my full thoughts on the second book. If you read the first one or both so far, definitely let me know what you thought about them, whether or not the second book holds up to the first book, if you enjoyed one more than the other. Definitely interested in knowing where people's mindsets are at in that regard. And thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you later with more.